Welcome back to Murder with Friends. Today we're talking about Elizabeth Bathory. Now, in part one, we laid out the story that a lot of you might know, the Bloody Countess killing 600 plus young girls. And now in this second part, we're gonna talk about some issues with the theory, some issues with the history behind what happened to Elizabeth Bathory, and just the story that we've come to know. I think that we should kick it off with talking about the trial. Why was this trial different than other trials, Cecilia? Like, why is it notable the way that this trial went down against Elizabeth Bathory?
Well, I think, first of all, a lot of ministers were complaining about her and the rumors that they'd heard and accusing her of being a killer. So they appealed to King Matthias, and he, after like a few years, was sure,
6
go
years.
for it. Yeah, it took a while to sort of get their attention, but once it did, he ordered an investigation led by Turzo, who was supposed to be her caregiver. So he then went around and in the space of one winter gathered 300 testimonies from villagers, etc. Now, the legitimacy of those testimonies, I mean, how would 300 villagers know what was going on inside of the castle? We don't know whether they were bribed or whether they'd heard, again, you said earlier, sometimes if you hear a lie enough or a story enough, you believe it.
Right, and if you hear a lie enough times, if it's repeated enough, it becomes true.
Yeah.
It feels true. And the truth is that people were dying that were at the castle because people in those times died. You would get infection, and there were the health methods and just, I mean, no one is saying that the life of the people that worked in Elizabeth Bathory's court was charmed. It was very far from
and
it.
We're not necessarily defending her.
No, not at all. I think she was super shitty. I really do. Super shitty.
Super shitty.
Super shitty. But I think that the idea that 300 witnesses, some of whom did work in the castle, but many of whom were outside villagers, would have any idea of what was going on behind the castle walls, doesn't really hold up to me. I think that there were deaths that would defy explanation for the time because many deaths did.
Yeah.
They were still doing bleeding. The medical practices of the time.
By the way they were executed, there was one servant, I believe, who wouldn't admit what happened, or that her mistress was guilty, and she had her eyes gouged out.
Oh, the torture methods.
And her breast cut off. So I mean, if you don't tell these people what they want to hear, you risk being horrifically mutilated. So anyway, after the testimonies were gathered, they arrested her on the 30th of December, and her trial was on the 2nd of January.
Yeah.
So it happened so fast. And I think
she actually didn't, she was not allowed to testify at her own trial. There's no record about what she says happened. She was accused of all this stuff and no one...
able to defend herself. She was not given that chance. And King Matthias wanted her executed. But her son actually proposed the punishment of being locked up because there's a lot of stuff going on, and we'll talk about this, where what did people have to gain from her being out of the picture?
Yeah, let's just go right there, because I think this is the strongest evidence that the story of Elizabeth Bathory might have been painted into a certain narrative over time, because there were people that had a lot to gain if she was out of the picture.
I mean, we've all seen Game of Thrones. People step all over each other to get to that Iron Throne.
That's what we were talking about this morning before we went to tape. I said, God damn, I didn't realize how Game of Thrones the story of Elizabeth Bathory was. So let's talk about who had something to gain. Let's talk about Turzo. I think that he had a lot to gain with her being out of the picture.
Yes. He had high political ambitions, and I believe that if she died, he sort of would be taking over the land.
Yes. He was, once Ferenc Nadasdy died, Elizabeth Bathory's husband, he was next in line for her estate. And she had a big estate. Yeah. She was, I don't think we can say this enough, how she was the most powerful woman in Hungary. And she ruled from in a variety of different castles, and she had a number of different villages that she presided over. And that to me has been another question with regards to the story the way that we know it. Because if she was to kill 600 to 650 girls and bathe in their blood and do all this stuff, I mean, she was traveling so often in between.
Well, allegedly,
where in her schedule is she doing this?
Apparently, she did it everywhere. So she tortured a bunch of people in Vienna, and there's this great little anecdote where the monks in Vienna were really upset because they could hear the torture going on and they could hear the screams, so they threw their pots at the windows to tell her to shut up.
But I kind of believe that. I think that she did ruthlessly torture her servants.
Or maybe she was healing somebody and they were screaming.
This healing shit. All right.
I mean, cauterizing a wound.
She's not Mother Teresa. I know. I like where you're going, though, but let's go to a quick clip right now of exactly what did Turzo find when he walked in on Elizabeth Bathory at Chechti Castle. Chechti Castle. I'm so sorry, Hungarian viewers. Let's take a look at this clip.
And what about Count Turzo? Because when he arrives at Bathory's home, he finds one girl dead and another dying. I mean, surely that's pretty damning evidence.
We don't know the cause. Why was that girl dying? Because of illness? But nobody asked her what happened with her. There was no testimony of this person, and it's very, very strange things in this case that the star witness is missing.
Instead, the evidence came from two key sources: Bathory's accomplices and independent witness testimonies.
So here are the famous testimonies.
Gabor discovered the most damning testimony came from 7 of Bathory's oldest servants. He thinks the Bloody Countess rumors started with them.
So let's talk a little bit about mob mentality and the power of rumors, because I still don't really know how did this catch on so much, because once the rumors started, it spread like wildfire. What is the origin here?
I think it's important to note that the witch trials were happening sort of in this century. So the Salem witch trials happened 80 years later. I think there was a lot of witch trials in Germany and Europe that were happening in the middle of the 1600s. So clearly there's something going on here with, you know, fearing whether it's women or, you know, women in power.
So the Reformation was going on through Europe, and women were, I don't want to say that they were gaining more power, but they were. I mean, there was progress in society. That's what happens as time goes on. And I do think that this was a time when women were feeling more empowered than they had. And you think that maybe there was the male nobility that was perhaps being threatened by that? Or were they just being threatened by Elizabeth Bathory specifically? Was it an issue with women in general or just this specific figure?
That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, I think another thing that was happening was all of this religious turmoil going on, all these different religions. At the same time, you have all these villagers that still believe in a lot of folklore and pagan myths and, you know, devils, and they said that she was caught fornicating with Satan.
I did read that as well, that she was actually caught mid-coitus with Satan, with Lucifer. So these stories catch on. To me, it seems like a lot of mob mentality and a lot of disgruntled, rightfully so, workers.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of villagers that were saying, hey, I'm not happy with the way that life's going because I'm a fucking slave. So you're saying that if I sign in you know, the next 3 months, everyone's coming forward and we're basically gonna oust our current leader from power, maybe things will change for my situation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point.
Yeah, because I just can't imagine, it's impossible that 300 people witnessed all the things that they were witnessing, especially because they're something that I can't get past. Where are the mass graves? I mean, if there were so many bodies,
were there any bodies found? I mean, aside from
there were. I think they can confirm about 30 bodies.
Yeah.
But
we're talking over a course of 30 years.
Yes.
A 30-year reign.
Between 1584.
36 girls died. I mean, of course.
Between 1584 to about 1609, let's say, there is record of about 30 to 35 girls that died. And a lot of them had a mysterious cause of death, but or may have died of sort of the exhaust of the terrible conditions that they were living in. But there isn't evidence that there were these, you know, I think we mentioned in the first part, these cages where she would poke the girls and then have the blood rain down on them.
A shower of blood.
Yeah. What do you think is the significance that Turzo himself was the one that blocked Bathory's petition to testify at her own trial? Because Turzo was close with Ferenc Nadasdy, her husband, and therefore, by extension, was close to Elizabeth Bathory, must have known her on some sort of an intimate friendship level. And it seems strange that he's blocking her petition. He's like, no, you can't hear from the
Especially
most
considering he
woman.
has a lot to gain from her. But, then again, there's a letter that exists that he wrote to his wife describing what he saw when he walked in, and would he have made something like that up?
So that's why I feel like the truth with Elizabeth Bathory is sort of in the middle of what we know.
Yeah.
It just doesn't add up that she killed 600 to 650
I think the
people.
official death count was 80.
Okay.
Which, is huge.
Yeah.
But whether or not she actually murdered 80 people or whether 80 people died under her care.
Yeah. That's a really good point to bring up as well, because there is record that some of her aides, her closest aides, were brutal, were ruthless. The ones closest to her really, they didn't want young girls climbing the ranks because their life was quite charmed being in the favor of such a powerful leader. So it's possible that some of her subordinates or her high-ranking subordinates were also carrying out these crazy medieval torture methods on the girls, and then Elizabeth would then be blamed for their suffering.
Yeah. So the whole theory is that she did all this because she wanted to retain her youth.
Yes.
And there's this great quote from one of the documentaries where this guy says, at age 40, she was fading. It's like, she's 40, leave her alone. I mean, again, that's pretty old for the time.
Yeah.
But, was she just so jealous of all these young, beautiful women that she wanted to torture them and use their blood to make herself look young?
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like a grim fairy tale, but people love them, and it just goes to show something about human nature. Why are we so fascinated? Why would we rather have her had killed, 650 people in all these awful ways than just, actually it was probably just a conspiracy.
And also that she was a really shitty ruler who didn't treat her servants well, and as a result, a whole bunch of them died, and probably some as a direct result of her messing with them and her torturing them. And then also was, ousted from power by some guys that were like, your husband's dead, your land's ours now,
Yeah.
That to me is a more believable tale than the one that is more interesting. But another expression that I've heard that I think about a lot with this show is the bad stuff is always easier to believe. And it's always more fun to believe the bad stuff. That's the stuff that makes us really crazy, is how could they have done this? And what is the reasoning behind this? But forget reason, because the folklore tale is why you're watching this episode.
Exactly.
And on that note, let's go to a clip of, this is a part of a trailer for the movie The Countess, which is loosely based on the life of Elizabeth Bathory. Let's take a look, and then I want to get a reaction, Cecilia.
Look at me. I'm rotting. I shall kill him. Look at what you've done. Leave. Thank you, my lord. Not only the look, but the feel of my skin is incredibly different. You have to be careful what you wish for. What is happening? You are giving me something beautiful.
The Countess wants fresh blood.
Bring me a virgin. You are mad. Like the blood before it is wasted.
A pile of rotting corpses. Dismembered children.
Lies.
One witness saw her copulating with the devil himself.
Everything has its price.
Why are you shaking, my love? Did you know how long I've been waiting for you? Almost lost my mind.
Almost lost her mind. Almost. So Cecilia, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Which movie would you rather see? That movie, the one where she is the Blood Countess, or the one where it's just a volatile political landscape in Hungary and some guys want to make sure that Countess Bathory is thrown out for good?
Probably the Countess.
It's a better story.
Yeah.
And I think that is what we've seen with, how she's been picked up in, I don't want to say the media, because it's not like the media is abuzz with stories of Elizabeth Bathory, but the Blood Countess does hang on a little bit more in pop culture than just sort of a crazy, very inbred ruler from 16th century Hungary.
I mean, there's something about the vampire legend that is so fascinating for people. I think that's why it's lasted for so long. And, you know, even now with, well, a little old now, but Twilight and all that happening, I mean, there's something that people find really fascinating about the idea of vampires and drinking blood and using it to retain their youth. And, you know, I don't know exactly why that is.
If you had to sum up the truth about Elizabeth Bathory to someone that maybe only knew the folklore, that only knew what they've heard in movies and whatnot, how would you sum up the life and times of Elizabeth Bathory?
I think she was a pretty badass female ruler, but she definitely ruled with an iron fist, and she probably treated her servants pretty badly. But at the end of the day, did she kill 650 people? I doubt it.
Well, yeah, I think that's a good place to end on for this episode. That is the story, the myth and the legend and the in-between of Countess Elizabeth Bathory. Let us know in the comment section below, had you heard this side of the story? Are we terrible for even speculating on some of this? Don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and we'll see you next time on Murder with Friends.